Before this episode begins, let's take a moment to speak of Jazz Journalists Association activities. 8 nominees for our 2025 Book of the Year Awards and 15 honorable mentions are posted at jjanews.org, along with other articles from our international membership. And we urge you to take a look at the Jazz Omnibus, the 600-page anthology of 21st century photos and writings by members of the Jazz Journalists Association, available online and wherever books are sold. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to The Buzz, the podcast of the Jazz Journalists Association. I'm Howard Mandel, president of the JJA, an international professional organization of writers, photographers, and broadcasters focused on jazz. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rayna Mathis, editor of Earshot Jazz of Seattle, Washington, and Chrys Roney, CEO and editor-in-chief of Hot House Jazz Guide, officed in New York, New York, about the work they do on publications that are comparable and yet different. So welcome, Rayna and Chrys, to The Buzz. Thanks for taking time to set this up. And I'm going to dive right in asking you, and I think we'll start with Rayna, how you got into jazz journalism and what brings you to your editing position here.
Yeah. Hi, and hi, Chrys. It's nice to meet you. I came into jazz when I was younger. My dad always took me to like a jazz festival every summer. And as I grew up, like jazz was always in my house. And then I started swing dancing. So when I moved to Seattle, I needed to find community. I didn't know anybody here. And the only thing I knew about community was jazz. So I dived in and found a wonderful community here. And then when the pandemic happened, my job was mostly in arts education. But when the pandemic happened, I realized I just kind of missed storytelling and I needed to reconnect with people. And the editor position opened up at Earshot and I jumped at it because, I think about how jazz brought me back to community and has kind of kept me here. So that's kind of how I came into this position. And I've been here since then. So the last 3-4 years. Yeah.
Had you studied journalism or been involved in journalism earlier?
Yeah, I had been writing for the Earshot publication before that and other local publications. My degree is in history. And so that's kind of where I also come from, of just history and memory and storytelling. Yeah.
I see. Chrys, you have such a varied CV, publishing, producing, corporate, strategizing, law school, some inventions that you've patented. How did you come to jazz journalism and to Hot House specifically?
Well, it's mostly Hot House. Hot House drew me in. I'm a jazz baby. My family have been active and part of jazz. My brother was 14, he recorded. My grandfather was part of the band that named Dizzy, and we internally say he named Dizzy. So, so we were the big band in Philly. And so I grew up around entertainment, but I am not anyone that people would pay. I was always behind the scenes. So I doing contracts, planning, strategy. And with that, I product development. So how I ended up in jazz journalism, just following the truth. After my brother's transition, I noticed that everyone was looking for different things to do, and I noticed there was something that listed the top 100 trumpeters of all time, and my brother's name was not on the list.
We should say your brother was Wallace Roney.
Wallace Roney. He was not on the list. Now, of course, in my world, he's the best ever. He's my big brother, so I'm the quintessential little sister. He's best ever. His best brother. That's been everything he does. But I understand, so he may not be number one on someone's list, but I thought he would be in the top 100. And at that point, I realized there's sometimes a disconnect between communities and marketing and how the world is going and real creators. And so there's a whole world of creators and contributors to our culture that has been overlooked because maybe they didn't do the million record sales, but they were a force. And so that's what led me into this part of it. But in the second part, my family are publishers. We publish a magazine since the 80s, Library Mosaics. So, and I've been helping with the family business. And when, that eventually landed in my lap as well. So when it was time to look at how to grow the business, I considered various things, and I met Gwen Kelly, who's remarkable what she has done. And also Jeff Levinson, remarkable founder, who's also a shoulder mentor if I need something. So I fell into it. It wasn't something I aspired to. It's something I actually grew up in, and it makes sense.
Interesting. I mean, just looking at what you've done in the last few issues and what you've been on in control of 4 or 5 months is all, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't look like something you fell into. It looks like something you really have grasped onto, And it's interesting that you both talk about this as community. Rayna, Earshot is a outgrowth of Earshot publication is an outgrowth of Earshot Jazz, a community organization, a not-for-profit, and the community element is very clear. You're writing about your board members, you're talking about your activities, and etc. But Hot House, as Chrys is running it, I mean, it was interesting, like you talking about people who've been kind of overlooked, and here's your July issue with Elmo Hope on the cover. I don't know when the last time Elmo Hope, the pianist who died in the early 60s, made a handful of records. I can't imagine when the last time was he was on the cover of any magazine. It's very sweet to see him, and people love him, and knowing the story of Monk and Bud Powell, that he was a part of that trio of friends and innovators. But that's another way of looking at community, like really over decades, over generations. But also you have a for-profit publication here, and it's just chock full of ads right now, which is great. And it really is a service to the business as much as to the community, sort of to the business first in a way.
Well, the arts community needs everything. We need entities that are supporting a solid mission, which doesn't have the strategy or the need to make money, and well, everything makes money, but the profit, because it allows the creativity to flow. And then we need our partnerships with for-profit, the companies who have the money. Hot House sits in the middle. It's really helping to promote what's to come, and at the same time have the integrity of, introducing the art. Even though we're for profit, we kind of sit in the middle. We're not running, like Coca-Cola with billions of dollars, but we're free enough where we don't have to go for the grant, so we can move and shake a different way.
Well, there's a big difference between Seattle and New York City, where you've got all these clubs and concert situations advertising for you. And Rayna, you don't have quite that much commercial activity to draw on, it doesn't seem like. But you guys are doing a good job, and you're very solid and secure in your community. Can you talk a little bit about how the business and Earshot intersect in Seattle?
Yeah, so Earshot, we're known as like two big buckets of work. We produce shows throughout the year, but really we're known for our monthly magazine and our month-long festival in the fall, so like October, November. But Earshot really started as a single-page newsletter, just talking about the community and like what what shows were coming up. And then over the years, it's evolved into the monthly magazine. It's evolved into producing shows and the festival. So really, like the magazine is like our heart. And so since Earshot has come out of that, we've never really had like a building of our own, a space of our own. So we work a lot with producing shows at local venues and working across various like local businesses for catering, photographers, and just interacting with the community that way to bring in and support this work of continuing jazz in the city. Yeah.
Do you feel that in any way that you have to navigate conflicts of interest as a journalist and as a supporter at the same time?
Good question. Sometimes I do. For the most part, I don't. And mostly also because I feel like I can't, because our scene is so small too. It's like you can't not overlap in things also. And I find that more of a strength, if anything, when we intersect in multiple spaces and we build our relationships stronger. I see it as a strength usually, and a way to engage with people in a way that maybe they haven't seen themselves a part of before.
So you're bringing them together through the platform, sort of. You're the platform
Yes.
helps to solidify that community, and I'm sure that's true for Chrys also.
Yeah.
Rayna, I love your publication. I love Earshot.
Thank you.
Really, really cool. We don't have a conflict either, Howard, because the approach we're taking, I've been taking, is we're trying to do straight journalism, neutral. The goal is to present truth. I tell people my spiel. I don't think talent knows color. Even though we're for-profit, we don't have anyone on our back saying, do this and do that. Even though we'll have an advertiser, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be beholden to cover their artist. The key is that the publication gets out throughout the city, that the people get to see the very show. So that's the honest part of it. New York City is considered the jazz capital of the world. And people say that, and then there's the fight between New Orleans and New York and all this East Side, West Side type thing. But taking over publication of Hot House helped me to understand why New York is considered the jazz capital of the world. There's approximately 10,000 shows a month.
Wow.
In the New York metropolitan area. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. And how we are bringing that community together is, I say, if we can take a subway to the city, that's, I'm calling the New York metropolitan area. You can take the SEPTA, which is the Philadelphia Metropolitan Subway, to Newark, New Jersey. And from Newark, you could take a subway. So for like $5, you can get to New York City. So I consider that circle the metropolitan area, 10,000 shows a month.
That's amazing.
And with that, there's strong commerce with the foods and the drinks. So just like there's Broadway with the whole tourism, there's people coming from all over the world to experience New York City and New York jazz. And that's where we sit.
It's a good place to sit. Let me ask you about your editorial responsibilities. And again, I'll start with Rayna. How does your month look? Collecting articles, making assignments?
For me, I, like any editor, I have a system that works in my brain and I'm only my brain. So, I mean, I have like several sheets of just like dates and ideas and things. But primarily, I think I would say like my month starts out going out to shows and like just being on the scene and in community, and not there just to find a story, but just there to meet people. And like I said, building relationships is so important because telling someone's story is a gift, and we must treat it like that. We must treat it as this treasure, and I don't take that responsibility lightly. And I don't really see Earshot as like we get to tell, or like here you have some coverage now on our magazine. It's more of the opposite to me, where I'm like, thank you for gifting us with this story. I so appreciate it. So that's what I do. I spend a lot of time in community. And then as I get to meet people, I reach out and ask if, we could set something up. And I usually send out my things in the beginning of the month and edit towards the end. And I work with different writers and, again, photographers as well. And I came into like Chrys, like I also inherited this magazine, and every editor before has been different. And my personality, which is very, I guess, jazz, is to continue to experiment and play with something. There's never been like one full mold of the magazine that I've kept, and I'm just like, all right, that's it forever and ever. I keep playing with it. 4 years, 5 years in, I will continue to do that. So that's sort of how my month looks of working. And then I spend like a weekend with the managing director at Earshot, who also helps me with layout. And we just hammer out the magazine that weekend, and it's ready on Monday. And I tell you, there are some late nights.
Magic. Magic.
That's John Gilbreth?
No, Karen Carapetby.
Karen. Karen, it was a jazz hero, JJA jazz hero a couple years ago.
Was she? Karen?
Yes, she was.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So was Gwen Kelly, actually. We named her a jazz hero also, the JJ. Celebrated them as, what we say, activists, advocates, altruists, aiders, and abettors of jazz.
Chrys, I saw you laughing at my editing schedule. Did you relate?
Magic.
Oh, magic.
What is that how you handle it also, Chrys?
I have a team of 15. There's 15 of us. It's similar, but a little bit more. It's very similar. So I acknowledge what she just said, but obviously it's a little different.
Yeah, we're a team of 2.
My challenge is, because we have so many shows, it's who to cover. And and that's hard. And we have kind of like the Motown approach. Was like, would you have this or a sandwich type thing? We try to we spotlight. It started out with 10. She only had 10 spotlights per month. And can you imagine, with 10,000 shows, how are you spotlighting 10 artists?
Spotlight, the center feature that you have that has
the centerfold. Yes, the artists call that the centerfold. It's like the centerfold, because they would say, "Ooh, who's made it in the middle of the book?" Right. So it started out with 10. I can't choose 10. So we go to 20, 30, depending on how busy it is, who's out there. But similar to Rayna's approach, it's meeting artists, understanding, what's going on in the industry. The challenge we have as being a monthly is so much that goes on in the city, that to capture all of that in a month in a small publication is really not fair. So we're probably going to expand that. Meeting artists, since I'm the editor-in-chief, I have editor and associate editor, so I assign some things. I've got great writers who will probably aspire and roll up to be associate editors at some point. We powwow, and I take ideas in. So I let them pitch me, because it's a big world. Then I have ideas, and then we all kind of shape it together. And from there, we go to town. We do the interviews. Then I have a copy editing team. So we go back, and once all the copies in, we spend days, because at that point we've got quite a bit of content to go through to get out. But it's a big process. And to do that every month, when we're done, I go, then we got to start it again next week.
What excites you when an article comes in? What do you like to see? What do you really, pleased to read?
I love the story. you hear me saying documenting truth. I get excited about the artist being presented about who they are. We aren't doing critiques. We don't review a show. So we are where we can really get to tell the story, who you are, what do you do, what do you want to do, where you want to be. You find unusual things because you can allow that to come forward. When we did the Duke Ellington, which was a great issue, my question was, who's still alive that played with Duke Ellington? And to find out, like, Kenny Garrett played with Mercer, and Ronnie Barrage was picked by Duke as a little boy to read a poem. So you find we still have those connections that no one talks about these stories. So I'm in it for the story. I get excited to find the new things that can bring the glue, help the patrons, the connoisseurs, the readers to connect with the artists a little bit more.
You too, Rayna? The story, the thing that really excites you?
I think, like, for me, when I send out assignments, and there's a mix sort of similar to Chrys, where it's like there's things that I'm interested in seeing, and then new things that the writers we work with have pitched. And so when I'm getting content back, it kind of feels like Christmas morning and you got a box, you're just so excited to open. You're like, I don't know what's in it. I have no idea what's in it. And I'm so excited to open it. And when I get a piece where, let's say it's somebody like, honestly, it could be anybody like who I do already know, or maybe I'm less familiar with. But when I read a piece and I can feel the soul of that person, that like I get them, I'm picking it up in those words. Like when I read pieces like that, that really excites me.
Are you talking about you can feel the writer, or you can feel the person that the writer's writing about, or both?
Both.
Yes.
Both.
Some writers are just, they floor me with their creativity and how they capture it.
How they capture, yes. I'm like, those words, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's poetry, and it's just beautiful.
How do you see your audience then? Because that's something you've both alluded to a little bit. Do you feel like you just have a static audiences, or is it changing all the time? Have you targeted people who aren't being served, who you think you can reach out to? How do you think about the people who are picking up the publications?
Good question. We have multiple audiences because Hot House is very popular with the musicians. So they pick up the book to see who's hiring. These are places I could work to pay my bills, right? And then they look to see what their peers are doing. We have tourism in the city. So I align with quite a bit of the hotels and work with the concierge, and to help, I'll go and say, look, this is what's happening this month in case someone's happening. So, that's an audience. So that's the new coming in. And they appreciate that. That's a whole service. Then we've got the aficionados who will write me if we say something wrong and do the corrections. Mm-hmm. But they're the staple. If you don't hear any bad things, you did something right that month. Then there's people who just luck upon the magazine and, for whatever reason, and they're learning about art, the art, not just jazz aficionados, but people who appreciate art in general, and they're open and they're learning. So we get the whole gamut as our readers. So that's why we have a little bit of history. We've got a little bit of what's coming, what's in the city now. We've got a mixture of that. Then one last thing, we have a new generation of musicians. We've got the young folks, and I came through the 90s where they called it Young Lions. And I badly say, but we've got a new Young Lions happening where the 18 to 25 they're hot, they're serious, and a lot of them are well studied, and they're bringing an audience. So that's a whole new audience in addition to everything else we just said.
Yeah. What's it like in Seattle, Rayna?
Yeah, I would actually say it's like very similar. And like we are also, I mean, I think something for the magazine that I want to make prominent, I guess, like for myself, like when I came into working as an editor, I felt a lot of like imposter syndrome, I guess, like not being a musician myself, not knowing all the technicals. I come into jazz as a dancer. I come into jazz as somebody who feels the music in my body. And in the beginning, I struggled with that being enough of an experience. And the longer I've been in here and doing this work, as JJA has talked about before, about like this work being an ecosystem, I came into that understanding. And so with the magazine, my goal is that anybody can come into the magazine and read the content there from whatever their experience or knowledge is, and that it's an accessible piece of media. So any and all of the audiences.
It's encouraging and unusual for me to talk to two women of color who are editing publications about jazz. And there's for decades we've wondered if jazz journalism was really open to more diverse editorial groups. Some of us have been trying to make sure that it is open to it, but it's really encouraging that you two are working in this field, and I'm not hearing anything about any exclusions that you've felt. Has it been a challenge because you are Black women or women of color? Has this made a difference in your careers in the jazz journalism sphere?
Yeah. I hesitate to use the word challenge, but in my experience, and kind of echoing what you were just saying, Howard, how it is unusual, it is, in my experience, has been rare to find like other Black folks in this profession. Maybe that may have to do with like my city and my demographic. Okay. But like, Chrys, it's wonderful to meet you. And like when I saw a photo of you, I screamed. I was like, this is amazing. This is exciting. Because I have often felt very lonely doing this work in specifically a genre like jazz. And at my organization, there have not been many Black folks hired, over the course of the time. And that is an issue. And it's not just it's like other orgs in town. And so I think a lot of this has to do with like how we are also building up leadership in these spaces too. Yeah. And that's not to like knock on any of these people. I love these people. We have great relationships and we work really well. And there's a lot of trust. And they trust me to do this work and they trust me to lead with my experience in that. So for that, I'm very grateful. But again, like in a medium like jazz, like I'm constantly in question of why I feel so alone here. It's also similar in swing dancing spaces too, as a jazz dance, as something that has been historically a Black art form, but can feel sometimes very distant from the folks that it came from. So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know, Chrys, what's your experience?
Well, first, great to meet you. Let's do this. I have a different perspective of life where I don't approach what's not there. I do my creative thing, and I'm humble in that I grew up in this space, so I saw a lot. So I think stepping into actually publishing, and remember, my family are publishers, so it's not where we haven't published other magazines. We just haven't taken our own culture bull by the horn. But I'm standing on shoulders of Betty Carter, who had to build her own management company because she didn't fit tradition. And I saw that. I saw women produce concerts like the Bay Sisters. And I saw Dorothea Kirk, who, BGO, she just being her own legend, creating, I've seen women step up. Monifa Brown, who well studied, and they pulled her in, and so a lot of the women, Black women, were the role was more in terms of producing and PR, feeding the media. No, that's not the story. This is the story. So we were more like associate editing without really that title because we didn't own the publications. And I know there's more people to add. Pat Prescott, who's been a mentor from a distance when she moved to LA, and I moved to LA, and she told me, how to live in LA, and then she moved back to New Jersey, and I'm back in New York. So like I've watched the women, brown women, Black women kick butt, and never once did I feel that we couldn't do it. Not that you were asking that. And being in this chair, I go back to them and say, "What's next? What do I do? What do we?" So I know it's another step, but there's a community, and this is our culture, and I stand strong, 10 toes down on that. We're here protecting the culture. I know there have been other publications that we've attempted. It just hasn't been mass distributed. I'm honored and I'm good. I also worked with Judith Jameson at Alvin Ailey. I was on the board there with Denise Jefferson. So I've watched the women the just go in and pick up things and do it. So I don't feel that I'm lonely. And as now they've given me this chance. It's like, heck yeah, let's do this. And meeting Rayna is wonderful. I don't know if I answered your question, but you see how my thought process is more, I'm not thinking of what's not there. It's so much to do that I hope to accomplish that before the next one comes, because we got to build the next too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for humoring the clumsiness of my question, but I really appreciate your candor, and both of you are giving me a lot of joy as just people who are supporting this music in media and finding interest and enthusiasm in doing that job. That's what jazz journalists want more of, So I think we've covered a lot of information, and I wish you both excellent progress in the weeks and months and years to come. And thank you, Rayna Mathis. Thank you, Chrys Roney. You've been listening to Rayna Mathis, editor of Earshot Jazz, the monthly publication of Seattle's nonprofit Earshot Jazz organization, and Chrys Roney, CEO and editor-in-chief of New York City's Hot House Jazz Guide. This has been The Buzz, the podcast of the Jazz Journalists Association. I'm Howard Mandel, president of the JJA. We drop new issues of The Buzz frequently. We also produce Seeing Jazz Music Photography master classes, which are archived on YouTube, and we put up articles and media on jjanews.org, where you can learn about JJA membership. This edition of The Buzz was edited by Wiz Petta, with Big Vic by John Michaels is our theme song. When you hear some music, write or photograph it or talk about it. Add to The Buzz.